I died at 37 with a broken heart and failed dream. When I opened my eyes, I was 17 again, sitting in my old classroom with my whole life ahead of me. This time, I swore I would never marry Minho. I would pursue my dreams of becoming a pianist and avoid the man who abandoned me for his first love after 15 years of marriage. But fate had other plans. Not only did Minho transfer to my school, something that never happened in my previous life, but he became my desk. Every day, I'm forced to sit next to the boy who will one day destroy me. The worst part? This younger version of him is different. He smiles more, laughs easier, and shows me a side I never knew existed. Just when I think I have everything under control, his first love transfers to our class. Han Seo-yeon, the woman he never got over, the real reason our marriage fell apart. Now I watch history repeating itself, but with a front row seat to their budding romance. The memories of our failed marriage haunt me while I struggle to focus on the upcoming piano competition that could change my future. I thought avoiding Minho would be simple. I never expected to be trapped between my knowledge of our tragic future and the chance to set us both free. Before we start this journey together, buckle up, get ready, and subscribe for a special surprise tomorrow. The last thing I remembered was the cold bathroom floor against my cheek. The bitter taste of wine lingered on my tongue as my vision faded to black. Death, I discovered, felt like falling asleep after crying for hours. I never expected to wake up again. When my eyes opened, I found myself staring at a familiar ceiling fan spinning lazily above my head. The morning sunlight filtered through pink curtains I hadn't seen in 20 years. My body felt light, unburdened by the weight of decades of regret and disappointment. I sat up slowly, my heart pounding as I took in my childhood bedroom. The walls were still covered in the posters of classical pianists I had idolized before giving up music for marriage. My old uniform hung pristinely on the door, pressed and ready for the first day of senior year. Stumbling to the mirror, I gazed at my reflection in shock. Gone were the fine lines around my eyes and the slight sag in my cheeks. Instead, I saw my 17-year-old self staring back at me. My long black hair was thick and shiny, not yet damaged by years of harsh dye jobs trying to cover premature gray. My skin glowed with youth, unmarked by stress and time. The date on my phone confirmed it, August 2005, 20 years before my death, 20 years before my husband Minho left me for his first love, 20 years before I realized I had wasted my life on a marriage that was doomed from the start. My mother's voice called up the stairs telling me to hurry or I'd be late for school. The familiar morning routine felt surreal as I mechanically put on my uniform and packed my bag. This was my chance to change everything. This time, I wouldn't let Minho into my life. I wouldn't give up my dreams of becoming a pianist. I wouldn't waste 20 years loving someone who never truly loved me back. The walk to school was exactly as I remembered it. Cherry blossoms lined the street, their petals dancing in the spring breeze. Groups of students chatted and laughed, their lives still full of possibility. I recognized faces I hadn't seen in decades, classmates whose futures I knew but couldn't reveal. I arrived early, determined to change my seat before the teacher assigned them. In my previous life, I had sat next to the window in the back row. That's where I first noticed Minho when he started paying attention to me in the second semester. If I could just choose a different seat, maybe I could avoid catching his eye altogether. But when I entered the classroom, my heart sank. On the blackboard was a seating chart, already filled out with our names. The teacher must have prepared it in advance this time. My name was still by the window, but that didn't matter. Minho wouldn't transfer to our school until second semester. I had months to figure out how to avoid him. I settled into my assigned seat, watching as my classmates filtered in. Everything felt both familiar and strange, like watching a movie I'd seen before but couldn't quite remember all the details. The morning passed in a blur of introductions and first-day procedures. During lunch break, I went to the music room. In my previous life, I had avoided this place, too focused on studying to maintain my top ranking. The grand piano sat in the corner, untouched. My fingers itched to play, to see if my muscle memory had survived death and rebirth. I was about to lift the cover when the door slid open. Our homeroom teacher stepped in, followed by a tall figure that made my blood run cold. This was impossible. This never happened before. Class, please welcome our new transfer student from Seoul. This is Kim Minho. Due to his father's job transfer, he'll be joining us starting today. Minho, please take the empty seat by the window. My hands gripped the edge of my desk as Minho walked down the aisle. He looked exactly as I remembered him at 17, tall and lean, with sharp features that hadn't yet fully matured. His uniform was crisp and new, his tie perfectly knotted. He carried himself with the same quiet confidence that had first drawn me to him. But this was wrong. In our previous life, we met in second semester when his family moved into my neighborhood. He had transferred to the school nearest to his new home. What had changed? Minho slid into the seat next to mine, offering a polite bow. "I'm Kim Minho. Please take care of me." I forced myself to nod, my throat too tight to speak. Up close, I could smell his familiar scent, the same one that had lingered on his side of the bed the morning after he left me. My hands trembled as I tried to focus on the teacher's words. This wasn't supposed to happen. I was supposed to have time to prepare, to build a different life before he appeared. Now he was here, close enough to touch, young enough that he hadn't yet broken my heart. The universe was laughing at my plans to avoid him. The afternoon classes passed in a fog of anxiety. Every movement from Minho's direction made me flinch. When he borrowed an eraser from me, our fingers brushed, and 20 years of memories crashed over me like a wave. Our first kiss under the cherry blossoms, our wedding day, the nights I spent waiting for him to come home, the day I found messages from his first love on his phone, the morning I woke up alone. When the final bell rang, I practically ran from the classroom. In the music room, I finally let myself break down. Tears fell onto the piano keys as I processed the cruel joke fate had played on me. Not only had I been reborn, but the universe had conspired to put Minho directly in my path months before we were supposed to meet. Through my tears, I began to play Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the piece I had been practicing before I gave up music for marriage. My fingers remembered every note, every subtle change in dynamics. The music filled the empty room, carrying 20 years of regret and pain. I played until the sun began to set, until my fingers ached and my tears dried. When I finally stopped, I made a decision. Even with Minho sitting next to me every day, I wouldn't let history repeat itself. This time, I would focus on music. This time, I would choose myself. I gathered my things and left the music room, unaware that Minho had been standing outside the door listening to every note. The next morning, I arrived early to arrange my desk as a barrier, textbooks stacked like fortress walls between Minho's seat and mine. When he arrived, I kept my eyes fixed on my notebook, pretending to study. If I didn't look at him, I wouldn't have to acknowledge how his presence made my heart race with both fear and something else I refused to name. "Good morning, Lijaya," he said, his voice carrying that gentle tone I had forgotten he once possessed. Before marriage hardened him, before responsibility and regret carved permanent lines between his brows, I answered with a curt nod, but he wasn't deterred. "The music I heard yesterday from the piano room, was that you playing?" My hand froze mid-sentence. I hadn't known he had heard me. In my previous life, Minho had never shown interest in my musical abilities. Even when I mentioned wanting to study piano, he had dismissed it as an impractical dream. "You're very talented," he continued when I didn't respond. "The emotion in your playing, I've never heard anything like it." Of course he hadn't. The melody had been infused with 20 years of lost dreams and broken promises he hadn't yet made. I shifted my books higher, creating an even taller wall between us. "I have to focus on studying," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. It was the same excuse I had used in my past life to give up piano. But this time it would only be temporary, just until I could figure out how to handle his unexpected presence. Throughout the morning classes, I felt his gaze on me. Each time I glanced his way, he quickly looked down at his notes. It was unnerving how different he seemed from the man I had married. This Minho was more open, more earnest in his attempts at friendship. During lunch break, I escaped to the music room again, but as I reached for the piano, the door opened. Minho stood there, holding. The classroom is too noisy. In my previous life, Minho had always preferred eating with friends. He had been popular, surrounded by people. This quiet, solitary version of him threw me off balance. "It's a free country," I muttered, moving to leave. "Please," he said, "play something. I promise to be quiet." Against my better judgment, I sat at the piano. My fingers found the keys of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, a piece I had mastered in my 30s during lonely nights waiting for Minho to come home. The melody filled the room, dark and haunting. When I finished, I heard him exhale softly. "You play like someone who has lost everything." The accuracy of his observation startled me. I closed the piano lid with more force than necessary. "You don't know anything about me. That's why I'm trying to talk to you," he said. "There's something familiar about you, like we've met before." My heart stuttered. Had some part of him retained memories of our past life? No, that was impossible. His expression showed only genuine curiosity, not recognition. "We haven't met," I said firmly, "and we're not going to be friends." I grabbed my bag and fled the music room, his confused expression burning in my memory. In my haste to escape, I collided with someone in the hallway, my books scattered across the floor. As I knelt to gather them, another pair of hands joined mine. "I'm so," a female voice said. I wasn't watching where I was going. I looked up to thank her and froze. The girl helping me was Park Min Young, my closest friend in my previous life. The friend who had stood by me through my divorce, who had urged me to leave Minho years before I finally did. Seeing her young face, unmarked by the worry lines my problems would eventually cause, made my eyes sting. She had been the only one who truly supported my dream of music. "I'm Min Young," she said, smiling. "You're in class 3, right? I've heard you playing in the music room." "Jaya," I managed to say. "Lee Jaya. You should join the music club," she said, handing me my last book. "We need someone with your talent for the school festival." In my previous life, I had declined her invitation, too focused on maintaining my grade. That decision had been the first step toward abandoning my dream. "I'll think about it," I said, knowing I would say yes this time. The afternoon dragged on with Minho's presence beside me becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Every small movement, every scratch of his pen reminded me of moments from our marriage. The way he would tap his fingers when thinking, how he tilted his head slightly while reading. But there were differences too. This Minho smiled more easily, laughed at our classmates' jokes with genuine amusement. The man I had married had become serious and distant, weighed down by expectations and unexpressed regret. When cleaning time came, Minho was assigned as my partner. We had to wash the windows together, an intimate task that required coordination. In my past life, this had been when we first started talking regularly. "I'll take the outside," I said quickly, grabbing the cleaning supplies before he could respond. The spring air was cool as I stepped onto the small balcony, grateful for the glass barrier between us. As we cleaned opposite sides of the window, I caught him watching me through the glass. His expression was thoughtful, almost wistful. For a moment, I saw a flash of the man who had once looked at me with love, before that love turned to obligation and finally to regret. I pressed the cloth harder against the glass, trying to erase the image. This wasn't the same Minho. He hadn't yet become the man who would destroy me, but he would if I let him into my life again. The next few days fell into an uncomfortable routine. Minho continued his gentle attempts at conversation, and I continued building higher walls. But it was exhausting, constantly guarding against his natural charm, his sincere interest in my music. During one lunch break, I found the music room already occupied. Min Young sat at the piano, practicing a simple piece. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Jaya, perfect timing. I'm struggling with this part. Could you help me?" I sat beside her on the bench, showing her how to position her hand. As I demonstrated the passage, I remembered doing this exact same thing 20 years ago, before I gave up music. The memory of that lost opportunity strengthened my resolve. "The music club meets after school on Wednesdays and Fridays," Min Young said casually. "Just saying." Before I could respond, a familiar figure appeared in the doorway. Minho stood there, lunch in hand, looking surprised to find the room occupied. "Sorry," he said, starting to back away. "No, stay," Min Young called. "Jaya was just about to play something for us." I wanted to refuse, but Min Young's expectant face and Minho's careful distance made me reconsider. Perhaps playing for an audience would help me focus on my goal instead of my fears. I chose Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor, a piece that demanded complete concentration. As I played, I felt rather than saw Minho move closer to the piano. The intensity of the music matched the storm of emotions in my chest. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. "That was incredible," Min Young breathed. "You have to join the music club. We're preparing for a competition in the fall." My hands stilled on the keys. In my previous life, I had wanted to enter that competition but never did. Instead, I had started dating Minho, letting my dreams fade in favor of his practical goals. "I'll join," I said firmly, not looking at Minho. This time would be different. This time I would choose the path I had abandoned before. I felt Minho's eyes on me as Min Young excitedly explained the club schedule. His presence was a constant reminder of what I was fighting against, what I was trying to change. But as I left the music room that day, I realized something unsettling. The more I tried to avoid Minho, the more our paths seemed to cross. The universe appeared determined to push us together, testing my resolve to change our fate. That evening, I practiced late into the night, playing until my fingers ached, and my mother called me to dinner. The music helped drown out the memories, the doubts, the lingering question of whether some destinies were truly inescapable. The memory hits me during math class, triggered by the familiar way Minho chews on his pencil while concentrating. We're in our apartment, 5 years into our marriage. He's working late again, the same habit that started in high school when he prioritized studying over everything else. I'm at the piano I bought secondhand, trying to recapture the skills I abandoned. He asks me to stop playing. He needs to focus. I never touched that piano again. I shake off the memory, but more follow. Each small gesture from the boy beside me, carries the weight of 20 years of history he hasn't lived yet. The way he runs his hand through his hair when frustrated. How he straightens his posture when the teacher calls on him. The slight frown when he concentrates. Lee Jaya, the teacher calls. Please solve this equation. I stand, grateful for the distraction. As I walk to the board, I hear whispers behind me. The other students have noticed my changed behavior, how I've withdrawn from everyone except Min Young. In my previous life, I was more outgoing, eager to please. Now I carry myself with the weight of an adult trapped in a teenager's body. The equation is simple. I solve it quickly. Muscle memory from years of helping our son with his homework. The thought of our son, who will now never exist, makes my hand tremble on the chalk. Very good, the teacher says. Kim Min-ho, the next one. We pass each other as he walks to the board. His shoulder brushes mine, and suddenly I'm standing in our kitchen telling him I'm pregnant. He smiles, but it doesn't reach his eyes. He's thinking of someone else, someone he left behind for duty and family expectation. Are you okay? Minho asks quietly. You look pale. I realize I'm still standing beside the board. The class is staring. I hurry back to my seat, avoiding his concerned gaze. During lunch, I hide in the library instead of the music room. But even here, memories find me. The study sessions that turned into shy conversations. The first time he helped me reach a book from the top shelf, his body warm behind mine. Min Young finds me between the shelves. The music club is meeting today. You're coming, right? I nod, grateful for her presence. In this timeline, she's become my anchor, reminding me of the path I should have taken. Good, she says, sitting beside me. Also, I think Kim Min-ho likes you. My heart stuttered. What makes you say that? He watches you all the time, and he asks about you in class when you're not there. I close my book too hard. He doesn't like me. Trust me. Min Young gives me a strange look. You talk like you know him, like you've known him for years. If only she knew. I changed the subject, asking about the competition pieces, but her words linger. Does this version of Min-ho like me? The thought is terrifying. I can't let history repeat itself no matter how different he seems. That afternoon in music club, I throw myself into practice. The competition piece is challenging, requiring technical skill I once possessed but now must rebuild. My fingers stumble over passages that should be familiar. Try it slower, Min Young suggests, forcing myself to take my time. The music fills the room, but something's missing. The emotion that usually flows through my playing is blocked, held back by my fear of the past. A movement at the door catches my eye. Min-ho stands there watching. Our eyes meet through the reflection in the window, and suddenly I'm back in our living room, playing this same piece while he packs his bags. The music falters. Sorry, he says, stepping into the room. I forgot my textbook, but he doesn't move to retrieve it. Instead, he lingers, listening as I force myself to continue playing. His presence changes the music, filling it with 2 decades of complicated emotions I can't express any other way. When I finish, the room is silent except for the fading echo of the final note. That was beautiful, Minho says soft. Sad, but beautiful. I close the piano lid, unable to look at him. You should get your textbook. He moves to his desk, but pauses beside me. How do you do that? Make the music sound like it's telling a story? Because it is telling our story, I want to say. The story of how we destroy each other, how love turns bitter, how dreams die quietly while we're busy making other plans. Instead, I say, practice. That evening, walking home, I take a different route to avoid passing the park where we had our first kiss. But Minho catches up to me anyway. We live in the same direction, he explains when I give him a questioning look. Of course we do. In my previous life, this was how we started walking home together. The universe seems determined to recreate every moment that led to our tragedy. We walk in silence until he speaks. The piece you played today, what's it called? Chopin's Ballad Number 1 in G minor. I answer automatically. It's about a love story that ends in tragedy. He looks at me curiously. You know a lot about music. In my previous life, I gave up that knowledge to focus on being the perfect wife and mother. I spent 20 years regretting that choice. Music is important to me, I say firmly. It's my future. That's good, he says, surprising me. Having something you're passionate about. This isn't how our conversations went before. The Minho I knew would have talked about practical careers, about stability and responsibility. At the intersection where our paths diverge, he hesitates. See you tomorrow, Jaya. I watch him walk away, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun. In another life, this was when I started falling in love with him. Now I feel only the weight of knowing how it all ends. The next day, our homeroom teacher makes an announcement that makes my blood run cold. Next week, we'll have another transfer student joining us. My pencil snaps in my grip. Number, it's too early. Han Seoyeon isn't supposed to transfer until next semester. She's supposed to arrive after Minho and I have already started dating, after I've committed too deeply to walk away. Beside me, Minho continues taking note, unaware that his first love, the woman he never truly got over, is about to enter his life months before she's supposed to. The universe isn't just recreating our past, it's changing the script entirely, and I don't know what that means for any of us. During music practice that afternoon, I play with a desperation I've never felt before. The notes become a prayer, begging the universe not to let history repeat itself in new and more painful ways. Minyoung notices my distress. Are you worried about the competition? I wish it were that simple. The competition feels insignificant compared to the impending arrival of the woman who will eventually tear my marriage apart. But in this timeline, I haven't married Minho. I've barely spoken to her. Why does the thought of Seo, Yan's arrival, fill me with such dread? That night I dream of my previous life. Minho and I are in our apartment. He's telling me he's leaving, that he's always loved someone else. In the dream, I play the piano while he packs, but the music follows him out the door, a melody of 20 years of mistakes. I wake up crying, the ghost of the music still echoing in my ears. Outside my window, the sun is rising on another day of trying to change destiny. Han Seo-yeon walks into our classroom exactly as I remember her. Long hair falling in perfect wave, delicate features, and a graceful way of moving that makes everyone stop and stare, including Minho. I watch his reaction from the corner of my eye, remembering how he looked at her photo 20 years later, with the same mixture of wonder and recognition. Even then, after 15 years of marriage to me, she held a power over him I never could match. Please welcome Han Seo-yeon, our teacher announced. She's transferred from Seoul International School. In my previous life, Seo-yeon arrived after Minho and I started dating. She transferred during winter, when cherry blossoms had long since fallen, and my feelings for him had already taken root. Now she stands at the front of our spring classroom, introducing herself while petals drift past the windows. There's an empty seat behind Kim Minho, the teacher says. Of course there is. The universe isn't even trying to be subtle anymore. I grip my pencil tighter as Seo-yeon walks down our aisle, her perfume trailing behind her. Minho straightens in his chair, and I see the exact moment their eyes meet. During break, students cluster around Seo-yeon's desk, asking questions about her old school. Her laugh carries across the classroom, musical and bright. I remember how she laughed the same way at our wedding, standing too close to Minho during the photograph. She seems nice. Young says, appearing beside my desk. Should we invite her to music club? My first instinct is to refuse, but I stop myself. In my previous life, Seo-yeon never joined any clubs. She focused entirely on studying, just like Minho. Their similar goals and attitudes were part of what drew them together. Yes, I say, surprising myself, we should. Minyoung raises her eyebrows at my unexpected enthusiasm but doesn't question it. She approaches Seo-yeon's desk, navigating through the crowd of admirers. I watch as Seo-yeon's face lights up at the invitation. She glances at Minho before answering, and I see him turn slightly in his chair to listen. I'd love to, she says. I played piano at my old school. Of course she did. Another detail I never knew about her. Another way she and Minho were perfectly matched while I was the odd one out. During lunch, I head to the music room as usual, but pause outside when I hear voices. Seo-yeon is already there, playing a piece I recognize. Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, the same piece she performed at the charity event where she and Minho reconnected 15 years from now. She plays beautifully, with technical precision that makes my own playing seem emotional and uncontrolled in comparison. Through the window, I see Minho standing nearby, watching her with undisguised admiration. I turn away, my lunch forgotten. In the bathroom, I splash cold water on my face, trying to calm down. This isn't my marriage. These aren't my memories to be jealous of. I've been given a second chance to avoid all of this pain. But when I return to the classroom, Seo-yeon is sitting on Minho's desk, leaning down to explain something in his textbook. Their heads are close together, and I'm struck by how natural they look. How right. Lee Jaya, Seo-yeon calls when she sees me. Minyoung said you're preparing for the regional competition. Would you like to practice together sometime? Her smile is genuine, free from the polite distance that would characterize our interactions as adults. She doesn't know she'll one day destroy my marriage. She's just a teenage girl being friendly. Sure, I say, because refusing would draw more attention than accepting. After school, the music club meets. Seo-yeon sits at the piano first, playing the same Rachmaninoff piece from lunch. Everyone applauds when she finishes, and I see Minho lingering by the door again, textbook in hand. When it's my turn, I choose Chopin's Scherzo No. 2. My fingers tremble at first, but then the music takes over. I pour everything into it. My anger, my fear, 20 years of accumulated pain and regret. That was incredible, Seo-yeon says when I finish. The emotion in your playing, it's like you've lived through something profound. If only she knew. I force a smile and thank her, but my hands are shaking as I gather my things. Outside, Minho falls into step beside me. You two play very differently, he says. Seo-yeon's technique is perfect, but your music feels more alive. The compliment catches me off guard. In our previous life, He never commented on my playing except to ask me to stop when he needed to concentrate. "You don't have to walk with me," I say. "I know," he replied. "I want to." We walk in silence until we reach the intersection where our paths separate. Before turning away, he hesitates. "The piece you played today," he says. "It felt like you were trying to say something." I look at him, this younger version of the man who will break my heart. His eyes are clearer than I remember, unclouded by guilt and obligation. Music says different things to different people, I answer. The next day, Seo-yeon brings homemade cookies to share. She places one carefully on Minho's desk before offering them to the rest of the class. I decline, remembering how she used to bake for office parties, how Minho always praised her cooking while barely touching the meals. She sits next to me on the piano bench. "Let's try a duet," she suggests. There's a lovely arrangement of Mozart's sonata for 2 pianos. I agree, and we begin to play. Our styles clash at first, her precision against my emotion, but gradually we find a rhythm. The music flows between us, and for a moment I forget who she is, who she will become. When we finish, I catch Minho watching us with an unreadable expression. He's been coming to the music room more often, always with the excuse of forgotten books or questions about homework. "That was wonderful," Seo-yeon says. "We should perform this at the school festival." The suggestion sends a chill through me. In my previous life, the school festival was where Minho first told me he liked me. We stood under the fairy lights, and he said my smile reminded him of someone he used to know. Now I know he meant Seo-yeon. Even then, she was the standard against which he measured everyone else. "I need to focus on the competition piece," I say. Seo-yeon nods understandingly. "Of course, but if you change your mind." That evening, walking home, I take my usual detour to avoid Minho. But as I pass the convenience store, I see him and Seo-yeon inside laughing over ice cream. The sight stops me in my track. This never happened in our previous life. They weren't supposed to grow close until years later, after chance brought them back together. Watching them now, their easy companionship obvious even through the store window, I realize the timeline has shifted more than I thought. At home, I practice until my fingers ache, trying to drown out the image of them together. The music helps, but not enough. Every piece I play seems to tell our story, a story that's changing even as I try to prevent it. Min Young calls late that night. "Are you okay? You seemed off during practice." I want to tell her everything. About my previous life, about Minho and Seo-yeon, about how hard it is to watch history rewrite itself in ways I can't control. Instead, I say, "I'm fine, just worried about the competition." "You'll be amazing," she assures me. "By the way, did you hear? Seo-yeon asked Minho to help her study for the history test." My hand tightens on the phone. In our previous life, it was Minho who asked me to study with him. That was how we grew closer, how he slowly replaced his memories of Seo-yeon with new ones of me. But maybe this is better. Maybe watching them fall in love naturally, without my interference, will help me finally let go. The next morning, I arrive early to find Seo-yeon already at Minho's desk, their heads bent over a textbook. They look up when I enter, and for a moment I see my future in their guilty expression. "Jaya," Seo-yeon calls. "Would you like to join our study group?" I look at Minho, who watches me with that same unreadable expression. In his eyes, I see no trace of the man who will one day choose Seo-yeon over our marriage, our family, our entire life together. "No," I say, my voice steady. "I prefer to study alone." I find the answer in my father's old newspaper. Buried in the business section is a small article about corporate bankruptcies. Seo-yeon's father's company collapsed 6 months earlier than in my previous life, forcing their family to move sooner. One small change in the economic timeline had brought her into our lives ahead of schedule. The butterfly effect ripples through my memories, rearranging everything I thought I knew. In my original timeline, Seo-yeon had attended an elite private school until her family's financial troubles forced them to transfer her to a public school in her final semester. By then, Minho and I were already dating. Now she sits behind him every day, her presence a constant reminder of what's to come, or what might come. The changes in the timeline give me hope that perhaps the future isn't set in stone. During literature class, we study a poem about fate and choice. Minho raises his hand to answer the teacher's question about theme. The poem suggests that destiny isn't fixed, he says, that our choices can change the path we're on. I stare at my book, the words blurring. In front of me, Minho continues his analysis, speaking about how small decisions can alter the course of our lives. Behind him, Seo-yeon nods in agreement. The teacher praises his insight and asks for other interpretations. The class discussion continues, but I'm lost in thought, remembering all the small choices that led to my marriage. If I had chosen differently then, would everything have changed? Or would we have found our way to the same ending through a different path? Min Young nudges me during lunch. The competition registration deadline is next week. Have you decided which piece you're performing? I haven't. Every piece I consider seems loaded with memories of my previous life. Even compositions I never played before carry echoes of the future I'm trying to avoid. I'm still deciding, I say. Well, decide soon, she says. By the way, Seo-yeon asked if we want to study together for midterms. My chopsticks freeze halfway to my mouth. What did you tell her? I said yes. She's really nice, Jaya, and smart. She offered to help me with calculus. Of course she did. Seo-yeon was always perfect that way, excelling at everything she attempted. It's part of what drew Minho to her, both in high school and later in life. After school, I stay late in the music room, working on potential competition pieces. Through the window, I see Minho and Seo-yeon leaving together, their shadows long in the setting sun. They walk close but not touching, their movements synchronized in a way that makes my chest ache. The next day, I overhear them discussing their study plan. Seo-yeon mentions a cafe near the library, and I remember with startling clarity that it's the same cafe where Minho and I had our first date. Except that hasn't happened in this timeline, and now it never will. During music club, Seo-yeon plays a piece I've never heard before. Her technique is flawless as always, but there's something different in her performance today. A warmth that wasn't there before. Beautiful, Min-young says when she finishes. What inspired that interpretation? Seo-yeon glances at the door where Minho usually stands, but he isn't there today. Just feeling inspired, I guess. I recognize the look in her eyes. I used to see it in the mirror 20 years ago when I first fell in love with Minho. Now I'm watching it happen again, but from a different angle. That weekend, I visit my old piano teacher, the one I abandoned for marriage prep classes in my previous life. She's younger than I remember, her hair still more black than gray. Your playing has changed, she says after I perform for her. There's a depth to it that wasn't there before, like you've lived several lifetimes. If only she knew. I tell her about the competition, carefully avoiding mention of Minho or Seo-yeon. You should play Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, she suggests. It suits your new style. I freeze. It's the piece Seo-yeon played when she and Minho reconnected at that charity event, the piece that marked the beginning of the end of my marriage. I can't play that one, I say. My teacher gives me a curious look but doesn't press the issue. Instead, she suggests Beethoven's Tempest Sonata. It's about struggling against fate, she says. I think you do it justice. On Monday, Minho is absent. The empty desk beside me feels strange after weeks of hyper-awareness of his presence. Seo-yeon keeps glancing at his seat, her usual perfect posture slightly slumped. During lunch, Min-young tells me why. His grandmother is in the hospital. He's visiting her. In my previous life, this never happened. His grandmother lived to attend our wedding, giving us a set of antique teacups as a gift. Another change in the timeline. Another butterfly effect I couldn't predict. After school, I find Seo-yeon in the music room, playing the same piece from last week. She stops when she sees me. I was hoping you'd come, she says. I wanted to ask your advice about something. My heart rate speeds up. In my previous life, Seo-yeon never asked me for advice about anything. We were polite acquaintances at best, secret rivals at worst. What is it? I ask, sitting at the second piano to put distance between us. It's about Minho, she says, and my fingers press random keys, creating a discordant sound. I think I like him. The words hang in the air between us. In another life, she would say these same words to me 15 years from now, tears in her eyes as she confessed to loving my husband. But now she's just a teenage girl with a crush, looking to me for guidance. Why are you telling me this? I manage to ask. She looks down at the keys. Because you watch him too. I've seen how you look at him sometimes, like you know something about him that no one else does. For a moment, I consider telling her everything about the future that awaits them, about the pain they'll cause, about the way their love story will destroy my life. But looking at her young face, free from the guilt and complications of adulthood, I can't do it. You should tell him, I say, the words burning my throat. When he comes back to school, she brightens immediately. Unable to speak. You think so? This isn't how it happened before. In our original timeline, Seo-yeon and Minho drifted apart in high school, their feelings unspoken until fate brought them back together years later. By changing the timeline, I've accelerated their love story. That night, I play Beethoven's Tempest Sonata until my fingers cramp. The music fills my empty house, a soundtrack to the future I'm both preventing and inadvertently creating. When Minho returns to school 3 days later, something has changed. He's quieter, more thoughtful. During class, I catch him staring out the window instead of taking notes. His grandmother passed away. Min-young whispers to me during break. Another change. Another deviation from the timeline I knew. In my previous life, Minho never experienced loss at this age. It was part of why he struggled to understand my grief when my father died early in our marriage. At lunch, I see Seo-yeon approach him in the courtyard. They talk quietly under the cherry trees, and I force myself to look away. This is what I wanted, isn't it? For them to find each other now, before I invest 20 years in a doomed marriage. But as I practice for the competition that afternoon, my music tells a different story. The Tempest Sonata becomes a lament for a future that no longer exists, for a love story that's being rewritten without me. Through the music room window, I watch cherry blossoms fall, covering the ground like snow. In my previous life, Minho and I shared our first kiss under these same trees. Now they're witnessing a different beginning, one that might lead to a happier ending for everyone involved. If only my heart would accept what my mind already knows. Minho starts lingering after music club practice, no longer pretending to need textbooks or have questions. He stands by the piano, watching my fingers move across the keys, his presence both familiar and strange. Today, he stays until everyone else has left. In the golden afternoon light, he looks so much like the man I married that my chest aches. "The piece you're playing," he says. "It sounds different from before." I lift my hands from the keys. The Tempest Sonata has evolved as I've practiced it, becoming less about fate and more about choice. Each note carries the weight of 20 years of memories being unmade. Music changes as we change, I say. He moves closer, leaning against the piano. "You're different from everyone else here. Sometimes when you play, you look older somehow, like you've lived another life." My fingers tremble on the key. If only he knew how right he was. We all have different experience. "Is that why you avoid me?" His question is gentle but direct. "Because of your experiences?" Before I can answer, the door slides open. Seo-yeon stands there, backpack in hand. "Minho, are you ready to go?" The moment breaks. He straightens, moving away from the piano. "Yeah, just a minute." They leave together, their footsteps echoing down the hallway. I stay at the piano, playing softly until their voices fade. The next day in class, I notice something new. When Seo-yeon speaks, Minho turns to watch her, but his eyes drift to me afterward, as if comparing our reactions. When she laughs at something funny, he glances my way to see if I'm laughing too. During lunch, Min-young confronts me in the music room. "What's going on with you and Minho?" I keep playing, letting the music mask my discomfort. "Nothing. He watches you all the time," she says. "Even when he's with Seo-yeon." My fingers hit a wrong note. "They're together?" Min-young shakes her head. "Not officially, but everyone can see where it's heading." I think of my previous life, of the photos I found on Minho's phone 15 years from now. Seo-yeon in a cafe, Seo-yeon at a concert, Seo-yeon smiling at the camera like she used to smile at him in high school. Good for them, I say, and restart the piece. But that afternoon, something changes. During cleaning duty, Minho and I are assigned to organize the music room. We work in silence until he speaks. "Why did you tell Seo-yeon to confess to me?" I drop the sheet music I'm holding. She mentioned getting advice from you." He picks up the scattered papers. "I want to know why." "Because you're meant to be together. Because loving me will only make you both unhappy in the end. Because I'm trying to save us all 20 years of pain." "You seem to like each other," I say instead. He hands me the sheet music, our fingers brushing. "What if I like someone else?" The way he looks at me makes my heart stop. This never happened in our previous life. We fell in love slowly, naturally, without this strange tension of knowledge and destiny between us. Before I can respond, the door opens. Seo-yeon enters, carrying her own stack of sheet music. "Oh, you're both here. Perfect. I wanted to ask about performing a trio at the school festival." The moment shatters. I step back, putting distance between Minho and myself. I need to focus on the competition. That evening, walking home, I take my usual detour. But Minho finds me anyway, waiting at the intersection where our paths cross. "We need to talk," he says. "No, we don't." I try to walk past him, but he steps into my path. "Something's going on with you," he says. "The way you play, the way you look at me sometimes like you're seeing a ghost. I feel like I know you, but I can't remember from where." "Because you do know me. Because in another life we shared 20 years together. Because your soul recognizes mine even as I'm trying to set it free." "You should walk Seo-yeon home," I say. "She's waiting for you." His expression shifts. "Is that what this is about? You think Seo-yeon and I don't think anything." I cut him off. "I need to practice for the competition." I leave him standing there, my heart pounding. That night, I dream of our wedding day, of Seo-yeon catching the bouquet with a sad smile. In the dream, I try to give her the flowers to change the past, but they turn to cherry blossoms in my hands. The next day, Minho is absent again. Seo-yeon looks worried, checking her phone between classes. "His grandmother's memorial service," she explains when she catches me watching. "He asked me to take notes for him. In my previous life, I was the one who took notes for him. I was the one who helped him catch up on missed lessons. I was the one who slowly became essential to his daily routine. During music club, I throw myself into practice. The competition is approaching, and I need to focus on that instead of the changing dynamics around me. But as I play, I feel Seo-yeon watching me. When I finish, she approaches the piano. "Your music sounds like heartbreak," she says, "like you're trying to let something go." I look at her, this girl who will one day become the woman my husband loves more than me. But right now, she's just a teenager trying to understand her own heart. Sometimes letting go is the only way forward. I tell her. She sits beside me on the bench. Is that why you pushed me toward Minho? Because you're trying to let him go? My fingers find the keys again, playing soft. He deserves to be with someone he truly loves. But what if? She pauses, choosing her words carefully. What if he loves someone else? I stop playing. What do you mean? The way he looks at you, she says. It's different from how he looks at me. Like he's trying to solve a mystery. I stand abruptly, gathering my things. You're imagining things. But that night, practicing at home, I can't forget her word. The Tempest Sonata feels different under my fingers, less like a surrender and more like a question. When Minho returns to school, something has shifted again. He stops trying to talk to me, but his attention becomes more intense. I feel his eyes on me during class, during music club, during cleaning duty. Seoyeon notices too. I catch her watching us watch each other, her expression thoughtful rather than hurt. During lunch, she finds me in the music room. I think I understand now, she says. Understand what? She sits at the second piano, playing a few random notes. Why you tried to push us together, you're afraid. The word hits too close to home. I am afraid. Afraid of history repeating itself, afraid of loving him again, afraid of watching him choose her in the end. I'm not afraid. I lie. I just want to focus on music. She stops playing. You know, sometimes the things we're most afraid of are the things we need to face. I look at her, wondering if some part of her remembers the future we're trying to prevent. But her eyes are clear, free from the guilt and complications that will one day tear us all apart. That afternoon, as I practice for the competition, I hear familiar footsteps in the hallway. Minho appears in the doorway, but this time he's alone. Can we talk? He asks. Really talk? I keep playing, letting the music speak for me. But he walks to the piano, gently closing the lid over the keys. There's something between us, he says. Something I can't explain. When you play, when you look at me, when you try so hard to push me away, it feels like we've met before. My hands shake as I open the lid again. We haven't. Then why does my heart recognize you? The question hangs in the air between us, heavy with 20 years of memories that only I carry. Outside, cherry blossoms fall past the window, just like they did on our wedding day. A week before the competition, I make a discovery that changes everything. Seoyeon isn't just leaving after graduation, she's leaving next month. Her father's work is taking him overseas earlier than in our club when she announces she'll be withdrawing from the school festival performance. The news spreads quickly through the classroom, and I watch Minho's reaction carefully. In our previous life, her departure was what pushed him toward me, seeking comfort in a new relationship. But this Minho reacts differently. He looks sad but not devastated. When Seoyeon cries while telling her friends, he offers her a handkerchief but doesn't try to console her the way he once did. Instead, his eyes find mine across the classroom. There's a question in them I'm afraid to answer. During lunch, Min Young corners me in the music room. Did you know about Seoyeon? I shake my head, fingers moving automatically over the keys. The Tempest Sonata has become my refuge, the only way I can express the turmoil inside me. She asked about you, Min Young says. Wanted to know if you'd take her place in the festival performance. My hands still on the keys. What did you tell her? That you're focused on the competition. But Jaya, I think there's something else going on. The way you've been acting. The way Minho looks at you, the way Seoyeon watches both of you. I start playing again, louder this time. There's nothing going on, but that afternoon, Seoyeon proves me wrong. She stays after music club, waiting until everyone else leaves. I need to tell you something, she says, sitting at the second piano. About Minho. My heart speeds up. There's nothing to tell. I thought I liked him, she continues as if I hadn't spoken. But watching him watch you, I realized something. What I felt was admiration, maybe even infatuation. But he looks at you like he's found something he lost. The words hit too close to home. In my previous life, Minho looked at her that way, like she was something precious he'd misplaced and finally recovered. You're imagining things, I say. She plays a few notes. The beginning of the piece we were supposed to perform together at the festival. No, I'm not. And I think you know that. Before I can respond, footsteps sound in the hallway. Minho appears in the doorway, textbook in hand. An excuse he no longer needs but still uses. Seoyeon stands, gathering her things. At the door, she pauses. Don't let fear stop you from being happy, Jaya. She leaves us alone, her words hanging in the air between us. Minho moves closer to the piano, placing his textbook on top. She's right, you know, he says quietly. I keep my eyes on the keys. About what? About fear. About the way I look at you. He sits beside me on the bench, close enough that our shoulders brush. I dream about you sometimes. Not romantic dreams, but strange ones. You're older, playing this same piano, but everything feels sad. My fingers tremble. Those aren't dreams, they're memory. Memories of nights I spent playing while he worked late. Of moments when music was my only comfort in our failing marriage. Dreams are just dreams, I say. He turns to face me fully. Then why do they feel more real than anything else? Because they are real. Because somewhere in his soul he remembers the life we shared, the love we had, the pain we caused each other. The The competition is next week, I say, instead of answering. I need to practice, but he doesn't move from the bench. Play for me. What? Play whatever you're feeling right now. No holding back, no pretending, just truth. My hands hover over the keys. Then, without conscious thought, I begin to play. Not the Tempest Sonata, but the piece I played on our wedding day. The music flows from my fingers, carrying 20 years of love and loss, hope and heartbreak. When I finish, the room is silent except for our breathing. Minho's shoulder is warm against mine, his presence both comforting and terrifying. I've never heard that piece before, he says, but it feels like I have. It's just a wedding song, I whisper. He turns to look at me, and suddenly we're too close. Whose wedding? Ours. A wedding that will never happen now, a future I'm trying to prevent. But looking into his eyes, I see something that scares me more than any memory. I see possibility. The door slides open before either of us can move. Min Young stands there, eyes wide. Sorry, I forgot my music book. The moment breaks. I stand quickly, gathering my things. I should go. But that night, practicing at home, I can't forget the way Minho looked at me. Not with the desperate longing he once showed Seo-yeon, but with something deeper. Something that transcends time and memory. The next day, Seo-yeon is absent. Rumors spread that her family's departure date has been moved up. She might leave as soon as next week, right before the competition. Minho is quieter than usual, but his eyes follow me constantly. During lunch, he finds me in the music room. She's leaving on Saturday, he says without preamble. 4 days from now. In our previous life, her departure took months to plan. We had time to adjust, time for feelings to shift and change. I'm sorry, I say, meaning it. He sits beside me at the piano. Why does this feel like history repeating itself? The question makes my blood run cold. What do you mean? I don't know. He runs his fingers over the keys, not pressing them. Sometimes when I look at you, I see two versions. The you sitting here now and someone older, sadder, someone I hurt deeply. My hands shake as I close the piano lid. That's impossible. Is it? He turns to face me. Then why do I remember things that haven't happened? Why do I dream about a life we haven't lived? Because we did live it. Because somewhere in the space between death and rebirth, your soul remembered what your mind can't. The competition is in 5 days, I say, standing. I need to focus on that. But as I walk away, I hear him start to play. The wedding song I just taught him. The one that doesn't exist yet in this timeline. The one that tells our story. I pause in the doorway, watching his fingers move over the keys. He plays it perfectly, as if he's known it all his life. As if his heart remembers what his mind has forgotten. And for the first time since my rebirth, I wonder if changing the past is as simple as I thought. Seo-yeon's farewell party is held in our classroom after school. The desks are pushed together, covered with snacks and drinks. Everyone is there except me. I stay in the music room, practicing for the competition that's now just 3 days away. Through the window, I can see them all gathered around her. She's crying but smiling through her tears. Minho stands at the edge of the group, his expression thoughtful rather than devastated. Not like the broken man who came to me 20 years from now, confessing he'd never stopped loving her. The Tempest Sonata fills the empty room, but today it sounds different. Less like a battle against fate and more like a question without an answer. My fingers move across the keys, muscle memory taking over while my mind wandered. The door slides open. I don't need to look to know it's Minho. She's asking for you, he says. I keep playing. I need to practice. Jaya. His voice is gentle but firm. She's leaving tomorrow. My hand still on the keys. In our previous life, Seo-yeon's departure took weeks. There were proper goodbyes, promises to keep in touch, a gradual fading of connections. Not this abrupt severance. Fine, I say, standing. But only for a minute. The classroom is loud with conversation and laughter. Seo-yeon sits in the center, accepting gifts and hugs. When she sees me, her face lights up. I was worried you wouldn't come, she says, moving through the crowd to reach me. I have something for you. She presses a small package into my hand. Inside is a book of sheet music, dog-eared and well-loved. My grandmother's collection, she explained. I want you to have it. You're playing, it reminds me of hers. She always said music was a way to speak truth without words. The gift catches me off guard. In our previous life, we were never close enough for presents, never close enough for anything but polite smiles hiding mutual pain. Thank you, I managed to say. She hugs me suddenly, whispering in my ear. Take care of him. He needs someone who understands his heart. Before I can respond, she pulls away, moving on to say goodbye to others. I stand there, clutching the book, watching her navigate the crowd with graceful ease. Minho appears beside me. Are you okay? No, I want to say. Because history is changing in ways I can't predict. Because your first love is leaving again, but this time you're watching me instead of her. I should get back to practice, eh? But he catches my wrist as I turn to leave. Stay, please. Something in his voice makes me pause. When I look at him, his eyes hold that same strange mix of recognition and confusion I've seen lately. Why? I ask. Because when you're not here, everything feels wrong somehow, like I'm forgetting something important. The party continues around us, but we might as well be alone. In his eyes, I see echoes of the man I married, the man who once loved me before memory and regret tore us apart. You're not forgetting anything. I lie. He steps closer, lowering his voice. Then why do I remember things that haven't happened? Why do I know exactly how you take your coffee even though we've never had coffee together? Why do I find myself humming songs I've only heard you play? Because your soul remembers what your mind can't. Because 20 years of love doesn't disappear just because time rewinds. Minho, I start, but Seo-yeon calls him over to take a group photo. I use the opportunity to slip away, returning to the safety of the music room. But even here, I can't escape the weight of memory and possibility. The next morning, Seo-yeon leaves before classes start. We gather at the school gate to say final goodbyes. She hugs everyone, saving me for last. Remember what I said, she whispers. Don't let fear stop you from being happy. Then she's gone, climbing into her father's car. As it drives away, I feel Minho's presence beside me. It feels different this time, he says. My heart stops. What do you mean? He shakes his head, frustrated. I don't know. Like this isn't how it's supposed to happen. Like everything's changed somehow. Because it has. Because in another life, her departure set us on a path that led to 20 years of complicated love and eventual heartbreak. Things change, I say. That's life. But as we walk to class, I can't help noticing how he matches his pace to mine. How he automatically reaches out to steady me when I stumble, his hand finding the exact spot on my elbow where he always used to catch me. During lunch, Min-young finds me in the music room. Are you ready for the competition? I nod, fingers moving through the familiar patterns of the Tempest Sonata. But the music sounds different now, less like a battle and more like a conversation. Minho's been asking about you, she says casual. About your playing, your practice schedule, everything. My hands falter on the keys. He's just being friendly. She gives me a knowing look. No, he's not. And I think you know that. The competition is 2 days away. I should be focused entirely on that. Not on the way Minho's soul seems to remember what his mind has forgotten. Not on the possibility that some loves transcend time and memory. But that afternoon, as I practice, I hear familiar footsteps in the hallway. Minho enters without pretense now, no textbooks or excuses. Play the wedding song again, he says. I shake my head. I need to practice the competition piece. He sits beside me anyway. Please, I've been dreaming about it. About you playing it in a white dress. About cherry blossoms falling outside windows like these. My fingers tremble above the keys. Those aren't dreams, they're memories of our wedding day, of a future that will never happen now. Dreams aren't real, I say. Aren't they? He turns to face me fully. Then why do they feel more real than anything else? Why do I know exactly how your hand fits in mine, even though I've never held it? Why do I remember the taste of tears on your face, even though I've never made you cry? But you have, I want to say. You've made me cry 1,000 times in a future that no longer exists. Instead, I begin to play. Not the competition piece, not even the wedding song, but something new. Something that speaks of second chances and the possibility of rewriting history. As the music fills the room, I feel his eyes on me, not with the desperate longing he once showed Seo-yeon, but with something deeper, something that feels like recognition. And for the first time since my rebirth, I wonder if some loves are strong enough to survive even death and rebirth. If some souls are meant to find each other across time and memory, not because of fate, but because of choice. The morning of the competition arrives with cherry blossoms swirling outside my window. I wake early, my fingers already moving through the motions of the Tempest Sonata. But as I dress in my competition outfit, a simple black dress I chose weeks ago, my mind is on the letter sitting on my desk. I wrote it last night, pouring 20 years of truth onto paper. Every memory, every joy, every heartbreak, the story of our marriage, our love, our eventual fall. The reason I've been pushing him away in this new timeline. The competition is at 2. I arrive at school early to practice one last time, the letter heavy in my bag. The halls are empty, most students enjoying their Saturday morning freedom. But Minho is there, waiting outside the music room. You're not supposed to be here, I say. I know. He pushes off the wall, taking a step toward me, but I needed to see you before the competition. In our previous life, he missed my first competition to study for entrance exam. It was the beginning of a pattern, of music taking second place to practical concerns. I need to practice, I say, moving past him to unlock the door. He follows me inside. I had another dream last night, my hands still on the piano lid. About what? About us. We were older, sitting in a different room with a different piano. You were playing that wedding song, but it sounded sad. I was working at a desk, telling you to keep it down. The memory hits me hard. It was 3 months before he left, one of the last times I tried to play for him. It was just a dream, I say, but my voice shakes. He moves closer. Then why do you look like that? Like you're remembering it too? Because I am. Because every dream he's been having is a memory his mind has forgotten but his soul remembered. I wrote you something, I say. reaching for my bag. But you can't read it until after the competition. He takes the letter, his fingers brushing mine. Why after? Because once you know the truth, everything will change. Because knowing our future might destroy any chance of a different one. Just promise me, I say. He tucks the letter into his jacket pocket. I promise. I begin my warm-up exercises, trying to focus on the music instead of his presence, but he doesn't leave. Instead, he sits in his usual spot by the window, watching me with those eyes that seem to see through time. The hours pass quickly. Soon it's time to leave for the competition hall. Min Young meets us outside, carrying a good luck banner she made. Ready? She asks. I nod, though my heart is racing. Not just from competition nerve, but from knowing what Minho will read once I'm on stage. The competition hall is crowded with participants and their families. I check in, receive my performance number, and find my way to the practice rooms. As I wait for my turn, I hear fragments of other performances, Bach, Chopin, Mozart. But when I close my eyes, all I can hear is the wedding song, played by 17-year-old hands carrying 37 years of memories. Finally, my number is called. As I walk to the stage, I catch a glimpse of Minho in the audience. He's holding my letter but hasn't opened it yet. The judges nod for me to begin. I place my hands on the keys, take a deep breath, and start to play. The Tempest Sonata has changed since I first chose it. What began as a battle against fate has become something else, a conversation between past and present, between memory and possibility. My fingers move with certainty, each note carrying the weight of 2 lifetimes. In the music, I tell our story. The joy of first love, the comfort of companionship, the slow decay of dreams deferred, the pain of watching him fall in love with someone else. But there's something new in the melody now, something that speaks of second chances and choices freely made. When I finish, the hall is silent for a long moment before erupting in applause. I bow and leave the stage, my heart pounding. In the corridor, I lean against the wall, eyes closed. I know that by now, Minho must be reading the letter. Learning about our marriage, our son who will never be born, the years of love and loss that led to this moment. Minutes pass. Other competitors perform. I stay in the corridor, unable to return to the audience, unable to face what might come next. Finally, I hear footsteps. Familiar footsteps that I've known in 2 lifetimes. Jaya. I open my eyes. Minho stands before me, my letter clutched in his hand, his face pale with understanding. Is it true? He asks. All of it? I nod, unable to speak. He moves closer, his free hand reaching for mine. The dreams, the memories, the way my heart recognizes you. It's all real? Yes. We were married, had a son? In another life, a life I'm trying to prevent. He looks down at our joined hands. Because I left you for Seoyeon? Because we both deserved better than a marriage built on timing and convenience. He's quiet for a long moment, processing. Then, the wedding song, the one I keep dreaming about, it was ours? I nod again, tears threatening. Play it for me, he says. Not as a memory, but as something new. I let him lead me back to one of the practice rooms. The piano here is smaller than the one at school, but when I begin to play, the music fills the space completely. This time, the wedding song sounds different. Not heavy with remembered joy or lingering pain, but light with possibility. With the knowledge that even if souls remember, choices can still be made anew. When I finish, Minho sits beside me on the bench. I understand now, he says softly, why you've been pushing me away, why you tried to make me fall for Seon again. I thought I could prevent everything, save us both from 20 years of mistakes. He takes my hand, his fingers fitting perfectly between mine. But what if they weren't all mistakes? What if some things are meant to be experienced, even if they end differently? Before I can respond, Min Young bursts into the room. They're announcing the winners, come on! We follow her back to the main hall, our hands still linked. As we wait for the results, I feel the weight of memory and possibility balanced perfectly between us. When they call my name for first place, the applause feels like a beginning rather than an ending. A new melody starting, familiar but fundamentally fall around us in the parking lot. Minho pulls me aside. I've read this future you're trying to prevent, he says, touching the letter in his pocket. But what if we wrote a new one? Not because of fate or memory or obligation, but because we choose it, knowing everything we know. In his eyes, I see both the boy he is and the man he was, both the love that broke my heart and the possibility of something stronger built on truth and choice. And for the first time since my rebirth, I let myself consider a future that isn't about preventing the past, but about creating something entirely new. The trophy sits on my piano at home, catching morning light as I practice. 3 weeks have passed since the competition, since Minho read my letter and everything changed. Now we exist in a strange space between past and present, between memory and possibility. At school, whispers follow us. Everyone noticed when Seonyeon left and Minho didn't fall apart. They notice now how he sits beside me during lunch, watching me eat with a familiarity that shouldn't exist between two people who barely spoke months ago. "You remember how I take my kimchi?" I ask one day when he perfectly portions it the way I like. He smiles, that same smile that once made me fall in love with him in another life. My hands remember even if my mind doesn't. Min-young observes us with curious eyes. "It's like you've known each other forever," she says. If only she knew how right she is. 20 years of marriage lives in the space between us, in the way he automatically steadies me when I stumble, in how I know exactly when he needs silence to think. During music club, I've started teaching him the wedding song proper. His fingers learn it quickly, muscle memory from a future that no longer exists guiding them across the keys. "In your letter," he says one afternoon as we play together, "you wrote about our son." My hands still on the keys. "Jung-hoon, our beautiful boy who will never exist now. At least not as we knew him." "Yes, tell me about him." So I do. About his first steps, his love of music, how he had Minho's smile and my stubbornness. About the way he used to sit between us at the piano, tiny fingers pressing random keys while we pretended it was Mozart. "I dream about him sometimes," Minho admits. "A little boy at a piano, but his face is blurry. The revelation makes my heart ache. Even our unborn son lives in his soul's memory." After school, we walk home together, not because of coincidence or convenience like in our previous life, but because we choose to. The cherry blossoms have long since fallen, replaced by the lush green of early summer. "What happens now?" he asks as we reach the intersection where our paths separate. "In our previous life, this was where he first kissed me. The memory hangs between us, both real and unreal." "I don't know," I admit. "Everything's different now." He takes my hand, his fingers fitting perfectly between mine. Different doesn't mean worse. That night, practicing at home, I play our wedding song, but it's evolved, becoming something new. Not a memory of what was or a warning of what could be, but a possibility of what might still become. The next day, Min-young brings news that makes my heart stop. "Seo, Yan's coming back for a visit next week." In our previous life, she never came back until that fateful charity event 15 years later. Another change in the timeline, another test of whether history will repeat itself. Minho takes the news calmly. "It'll be good to see her," he says, but his eyes are on me. I throw myself into practice, preparing for the upcoming school festival. The music room becomes my sanctuary again, but now Minho joins me without pretense. "Play something new," he suggests one afternoon, "something that isn't about our past." So I improvise, letting my fingers create a melody that speaks of present moments and future possibilities. He watches me with those eyes that see through time, that recognize me across lifetime. When Seo-yan arrives, she brings change with her. She's different, more confident after her time abroad. Her presence draws attention just as it always did, but something fundamental has shifted. During lunch, she finds us in the music room. "You two finally figured it out," she says, smiling. Minho looks at her curiously. "Figured what out?" "That some loves transcend time." She sits at the second piano, playing a few notes. "I felt it even before I left. The way you looked at each other, like you were remembering something no one else could see." I exchange glances with Minho. In his eyes, I see understanding. Seo-yan might not know our story, but her soul recognizes the truth of it. She stays for 3 days. We have lunch together, play music together, share stories of her new life abroad, but there's no tension. No undercurrent of unspoken feelings. The future I feared seems increasingly distant, like a dream fading in morning light. On her last day, she pulls me aside. "I'm glad you stopped being afraid," she says. "What do you mean?" She gestures toward Minho, who's talking with Min-young across the room. "You were so scared of something when I first came here. Something about him, about me, about all of us. But now you're free of it. Because now I know that history doesn't have to repeat itself, that souls can remember love without being bound by past mistakes." After she leaves again, Minho and I stay late in the music room. The setting sun paints everything gold, just like it did on our wedding day in another life. "What are you thinking?" he asks as I play softly. "About how different everything is, how we're writing a new story." He joins me at the piano, his hands finding the keys alongside mine. Together, we play our wedding song. But it's not just a memory anymore. It's become something else, something that belongs to who we are now, not who we were then. "I may not remember everything," he says when we finish, "but my soul knows you. Across time, across lives, it knows you." And as the last notes fade into the golden light, I realize that maybe this was the point all along, not to prevent the path, but to learn from it. To choose love not because of fate or memory or obligation, but because we want to write a new story together. A story that begins not with cherry blossoms and innocent hearts, but with understanding and conscious choice. A story where love isn't something that happens to us, but something we choose every day, with full knowledge of both its pain and its possibility. The competition trophy catches the setting sun, throwing rainbows across the music room walls. In its reflection, I see both who we were and who we might become. Two souls finding each other again, not because destiny demands it, but because we choose it, and perhaps that makes all the difference. Summer arrives with the weight of memory and possibility. The school festival approaches, marking what would have been the beginning of my relationship with Minho in our previous life. But this time, everything is different. We sit together in the music room during lunch, sharing a box of strawberries he brought. His fingers are stained red as he hands me the ripest ones, just like he used to do during our marriage. I remember doing this before, he said, in a different kitchen with different hands. These moments happen more frequently now, fragments of our past life surfacing in his consciousness, not as dreams anymore, but as clear memories. You used to bring strawberries home every summer, I tell him, even when they weren't in season. He looks at his hands, young and unscarred. In our previous life, he had a small burn mark on his left palm from cooking dinner on our 5th anniversary. Tell me something else, he says, something happy from our past life. So I tell him about our honeymoon in Jeju, about the way he carried me across tide pools, about how we got lost trying to find our hotel and ended up discovering the best seafood restaurant on the island. We were happy then, he says softly. We were, until we weren't. The school bell rings, calling us back to class. As we walk through the hallways, I notice how naturally we fall into step together, our bodies remembering a rhythm learned over 20 years. During the festival preparations, Min Young watches us with knowing eyes. You two are like an old married couple, she jokes. If only she knew how right she is, how we carry the muscle memory of 2 decades together in our teenage bodies. The festival stage is set up under the cherry trees, now heavy with green leaves instead of blossoms. In our previous life, this was where Minho first told me he liked me, where our story began, built on youth and timing rather than understanding and choice. We should perform together, he suggests during practice, the wedding song. I look at him sharply. Are you sure? He nods, moving to sit beside me at the piano, not as a memory of what was, but as a beginning of what could be. So we practice, his hands following mine across the keys. The song changes as we play it together, becoming something new, not a reminder of lost dreams, but a promise of possibilities. The day before the festival, he finds me in the music room after everyone has left. I need to tell you something, he says, sitting beside me at the piano. I remember everything now. My fingers freeze on the keys. What do you mean? Not just fragments or dreams? Everything. Our wedding day, the apartment we lived in, the sound of young Hoon's laughter, the way you looked the more— How? It started after your letter, but it wasn't complete. Then last night, watching you play, it all came back. 20 years of memories flooding in at once. I turn to face him fully. In his eyes, I see not just the boy he is now, but the man he was then. The man who loved me, hurt me, and ultimately chose someone else. And now? I ask, my voice barely a whisper. He takes my hands in his. They're different hands now. Younger, unscarred by time and choices, but they still fit perfectly together. Now I understand why you tried so hard to change things, why you pushed me towards Seon. You wanted to spare us both the pain of watching our love slowly die. We weren't meant to last, I say, repeating the words I've told myself since my rebirth. No, he agrees, surprising me. Not that version of us. We were too young, too caught up in what we thought love should be. I held on to an idealized memory of Seoyeon, and you gave up your dreams to become who you thought I needed. His words hit home, speaking truths I've known but never articulated. But this time is different, he continues. We know who we are, what we want, what we're capable of losing. Outside, the festival preparations continue. Students call to each other as they hang decorations and set up booths. Life moves forward, unaware of the weight of memory and choice contained in this room. I'm not the same person you married, I tell him, and you're not the same person who left. Good, he says simply, because those people made choices based on youth and ignorance. We have the chance to choose differently. The next day, during the festival, we take our places at the piano. The audience falls silent as we begin to play. The wedding song flows from our fingers, but it's transformed. No longer a memory of what was or a warning of what could be, but a declaration of what we choose. 4 hands on the key, 2 hearts beating in sync, creating something entirely new from the ashes of what was lost. When we finish, the applause feels like absolution, like permission to write a new story, one where we love not because it's easy or destined, but because we choose it with full knowledge of its cost and worth. After the performance, we stand under the same trees where our story first began in another life. But this time, when he reaches for my hand, it's not with the hesitant affection of first love. I choose you, he says simply, not because of fate or memory or obligation, but because I know exactly who you are, who I am, and what we could be together. And in his eyes, I see something I never saw in our previous life, complete understanding, the kind that only comes from losing everything and finding the courage to try again. Min Young finds us later as the festival winds down. That song, she says, it felt like a whole lifetime compressed into music. She doesn't know how right she is, how we poured 20 years of love, loss, and redemption into those notes. That evening, as we walk home together, The setting sun paints everything in shades of gold. Just like our wedding day, just like the day he left, just like this moment now where past and present merge into possibility. What happens next? I ask, echoing his question from weeks ago. He squeezes my hand gently. We write a new story, one where we both chase our dreams, where we love each other not despite our differences but because of them, where we choose each other every day, knowing exactly what we're choosing. And as we stand at the intersection where our paths once diverged, I realize that some loves are strong enough to survive even death and rebirth, not because they're destined, but because they're chosen. We choose to remember, we choose to forgive, we choose to try again. And perhaps that's the greatest love story of all. 10 years later, I stand backstage at Seoul Arts Center waiting to perform. My fingers move through the familiar warm-up exercises, muscle memory perfected through years of dedication to the path I once abandoned. Through the curtain, I hear the murmur of the audience. This is my 5th solo concert, each one a testament to the choice I made when given a second chance at life. A hand touches my shoulder, warm and familiar. Minho stands behind me holding a bouquet of flowers. Not roses like he gave me at our wedding in our previous life, but lilies. My favorite in this one. Ready? He asks. I nod, taking in his appearance. At 27, he looks different from the man I married in our past life. His eyes are clearer, unburdened by regret. His smile comes easier, unrestricted by obligations and unspoken desire. The composer is in the audience, he tells me. She's excited to hear your interpretation of her piece. In this life, Minho became a music producer instead of a businessman. He works with composers and musicians, building bridges between classical and contemporary music. It's a path neither of us could have imagined in our previous life. Min Young appears, clipboard in hand. She manages my concerts now, turning her organizational skills into a successful career. 5 minutes, she said. The house is full. I peek through the curtain. In the front row, I see a familiar face. Seoyeon sits with her husband, a kind-eyed doctor she met during her studies abroad. She flies in for my concerts whenever she can, her friendship one of the unexpected gifts of this new timeline. As I take my place on stage, my hands find the keys with certainty. The first piece is the one that changed everything. Beethoven's Tempest Sonata. But it sounds different now. No longer a battle against fate, but a celebration of choice. The music flows through me, carrying the weight of 2 lifetimes, but the lightness of freedom. In the audience, Minho watches with eyes that remember both who we were and who we've become. During intermission, he brings me water, his hand lingering on mine as he passes the bottle. Even after 10 years, every touch carries the awareness of what we almost lost, what we chose to rebuild. Jung-hoon would have loved this, he says soft. The name of our unborn son no longer brings pain. Instead, it's a tender reminder of the life we lived, the lessons we learned, the choices we made. He's out there somewhere, I reply. Maybe in another family making different music. Minho smiles, understanding. We've made peace with the children we didn't have in this life, choosing instead to pour our love into music, into each other, into the students we teach and mentor. The second half of the concert begins. I play our wedding song, but it's evolved over the years. Each performance adds new layers of meaning, transforming what was once a memory of loss into a celebration of renewal. After the concert, we host a small reception. Seoyeon hugs me warmly, her eyes bright with tears. That last piece, she says, it felt like a love story. She doesn't know it's our love story, stretched across time and choice and second chances. In this timeline, she's found her own happiness, unencumbered by the weight of being someone's idealized first love. Later that night, Minho and I walk home together. The cherry trees lining the street are heavy with summer leaves, so different from the blossoms that marked our beginnings in both lifetimes. Do you ever regret it? He asked. Choosing this path instead of the one we lived before? I think about our previous life, about the comfortable house we owned, the son we raised, the stable but hollow marriage we built, about how we looked perfect on paper but were slowly dying inside. No, I answer honestly. This life might not be as conventionally successful, but it's real. We chose it with open eyes and full hearts. He stops walking, turning to face me. At 27, he's the same age he was when our marriage started falling apart in our previous life, but his eyes hold none of the restless discontent I remember. I dream about our past life sometimes, he admits, not with regret, but with gratitude. If we hadn't lived it, we wouldn't know how precious this one is. We reach our apartment, small but filled with music and light. 2 pianos sit side by side in the living room, keys worn smooth from hours of playing together. I sit at one, my fingers finding the keys automatically. Minho joins me at the other, and together we play the duet we performed at the school festival 10 years ago. The music fills our home, a testament to all we've built, all we've chosen, all we've become. When we finish, he takes my hand, his fingers fitting perfectly between mine just as they have across 2 lifetimes. "I choose you," he says, echoing the words he spoke under those cherry trees a decade ago. "Every day, I choose you." And as the night settles around us, I realize that this is what true love is. Not a destined path we're forced to walk, not a perfect story without struggles or doubts, but a choice we make every day with full knowledge of its cost and worth. We carry the memories of our past life not as a burden, but as a gift. They taught us what love can survive, what it can overcome, what it can become when chosen freely and lived fully. In the end, that's the greatest difference between our 2 lives. The first was lived in the shadow of what we thought love should be. This one is lived in the light of what love truly is. A choice, a journey, a song we write together note by note, day by day, creating something beautiful from the wisdom of what was and the courage to choose what could be. And as I look at Minho, at the life we've built, at the music we've made, I know with absolute certainty that some loves are strong enough to transcend time and memory, not because they're destined, but because they're chosen. Again and again and again,